We are very pleased to have him here. Please welcome him to John Carroll University.
A lot of help. So how many are here because they got a bribe of class credits or a quiz later, huh? All right, some honest people. All right, good. So, yeah, I got #1 grandsons here. This is a great school. If some of you have a chance to kind of buddy up to him and pitch the school, I'd love it. His mom would like him to stay close to home. Of course, he wants to get far away from home. I'm a native Clevelander. Cleveland, the Invacare Corporation has its roots back to a company called Worthington back in 1888. So it's in between 1988 and 1979 when our founder in the present form of the company, Mr. Mellen, bought the company, which was a small, minuscule part of Johnson & Johnson in a leveraged buyout. It was $19 million in revenue at the time, and he made the acquisition for the grand sum of $7.8 million. So it was a good deal, of course. Today, we're a $1.4 billion company. We've got almost 6,000 employees around the globe. Our market capitalization is $548 million, and our enterprise value is $667 million. Invacare's focus is on home medical devices and medical devices for long-term care. It's the small part of the healthcare continuum, and it's put it in context of Medicare. 0.4% of the Medicare spend is for home medical devices, just to put it in perspective. So in that world, we're in the world of the American economy. It's a small business. In the world of home health care, home medical devices, we are the big player. We're 4 times larger than our next largest competitor, and we did it with a unique strategy. We are the most diversified company in terms of product portfolio. The legacy business is what we call lifestyle products. Those are the things you see in Drug Mart, Walmart: canes, commodes, crutches, bathing aids, toileting aids. The bent metal, as the people in the industry say. So the commodity items. That's the legacy of the business. The future of the business is in oxygen therapy products, where we're #1, mobility and seating, where we're #1, and we started a long-term care division because there's a lot of harmonization of technologies and platforms, and a lot of what are predominantly home medical devices are also sold into the long-term care community. So this is unique. Most of our competitors are focused geographically. They may have a diversified portfolio, but they're focused in 1 or more countries, or they're geographically diverse and they focus on 1 or 2 product categories. What makes us different is the diversity, and part of the leverageable benefit that we have is twofold. When we establish relationships with our intermediators, or the people who provide the products to patients, we have one-stop shopping. We can take that relationship and leverage it across a broad portfolio of products, because there's our customer base typically deals with all of or most of these individual product categories. There's respiratory therapy, oxygen therapy, and mobility, high-end mobility. The complex rehab products are the few areas where there's enough meat on the bone that they can focus on that and dedicate themselves to that. But they always bring along other things with it. So we have the advantage of one-stop shopping, again, a broader platform, and our supply chain. We build supply chain platforms. We develop supply chain platforms, and we leverage multiple products across the factories and distribution centers, which is also an advantage. Like I said, so not only are we diverse, but we have #1 or #2 market share position in most of the major categories, and you can see that by and large people are in much narrower segments of the product categories. There are 3 people. There's 3 people who tried to emulate the geographically diverse, product category diverse strategy. 3 other companies, a German company and 2 American companies. The 2 of them filed bankruptcy and went out of business, and the other is The other was taken private after 2 years of loss. It was taken private by a Chicago-based private equity firm, and it took them 9 years to fix it up and get rid of it. So how do we do that? It was the secret sauce. Why we were successful and why other people weren't. I'd say there are two major issues that are important for you as you study or whatever your specialty is. One is empowerment. We operate as a holding company, so we developed autonomous businesses who had control over resources, and we empowered them to focus on the needs of their unique markets. We didn't take American products and push them against some French executives and have them develop those in the French market. And financial controls. You have to have good financial controls. You have to have so I spent most of my early years at Invacare as a circuit rider. We'd go out and visit the French teams and the German teams and the Australian teams, and you'd meet once a year to kind of develop a contract on what do we need to accomplish, how are you going to do that, and how will we know whether you're accomplishing it? So it's pretty simple when you get down to it. And then going out and meeting with the teams to see whether or not that's happening, so you don't get drift and discover you got a problem. You got to stay close to it, and you have to have reliable, dependent financial controls. And the people who couldn't do it couldn't accomplish those things. They tried to do it. They tried to control it from on high, and the markets are very different. The products look the same. They're very similar, but the markets are different. The regulatory requirements, the specifications for the product, the steps of distribution are different. For me to try to understand, I knew enough to be dangerous. I knew enough to know that they were different, but I didn't know enough to tell people in Denmark, in Italy, tell people what they should be doing. I had to trust that they knew what they were doing and they were staying close to it, because healthcare is a dynamic market. Every business is dynamic. So that was the secret sauce, and it was successful. It had some pitfalls, so we'll get into that. As I said, we had great geographic diversity, and another key to our success was when I joined the company, I had a good deal of international experience. I just didn't target to do that, but it kind of fate dealt that to me, and I was used to traveling around the world. I was used to understanding local markets. Before I did anything. I did that for Mal, and discovered that the product that this is an important foundational piece. Home care is a young industry. There was always people who were cared for at the home, but as a institutionalized, accepted, legitimate step in the healthcare continuum, it really didn't. That's a fairly new phenomenon. It didn't really develop in the industrialized world until the '60s, and that's when the last runaway cost of healthcare crisis existed, and I'll talk about that more. But when home healthcare was established as an entitlement for a place for a less expensive place for people to go, the regulations were the accountants, the administrators in Washington or Paris or Berlin had to make sure that government got what they paid for. So they created standards, and they created standards the German regulatory authorities went out to see the German companies, and the French regulatory authorities went out to see the French companies. And so they were because by and large the products are not clinical, the standards were very different. And so when we look to expand into Europe, choice number one is take the products we have and then go to this international market and say, well, it's kind of like what you want, but it's not exactly like what you want, and competing against national manufacturers. And that people tried that. I mean, people tried that, but it was obviously the potential of that strategy was very small. And that was kind of probably the genesis of, well, we got to hire smart people, either buy platforms or hire smart people who will develop platforms that are appropriate for those markets, so you didn't have to constantly overcome that selling objection. When you get into sales, you got to understand, you got to you got to understand what the needs are, and you got to understand what the problems are of the customer, and you have to overcome objections. Going into the selling process with a built-in structural disadvantage, competing against their brethren, their French companies in France and the German companies in Germany, was again a non-starter. So we hired smart people, we empowered them, we helped them with IT things, but we didn't give them IT things. We helped them with engineering. They had access to the toolbox, but that was not a requirement. We exposed them to products we had, technologies we had, and said, try to use this because rather than recreating the wheel, but it wasn't required. It wasn't required. And at the end of the day, it worked. Like I said, we're 4 times larger than the next largest competitor. We're a unique and very successful formula. The other part of the secret sauce is innovation. This is the part, the one my brother is disabled, Dave's uncle, and so I love this stuff. And he's in a chair. And Invacare, one of the core technologies is right here. Invacare introduced microprocessor technology to power wheelchairs. You know, I got this chart that shows the anthropology of wheelchairs. You know, first there was a chair, and then there was a chair with wheels, and then it kind of evolved as people had needs. Well, this was in the 70s. The ability of a person with disabilities to control a wheelchair was limited to his dexterity of his extremities, because that's all it was, a joystick, and it was a rather clumsy joystick. So with potentiometers, and it worked, but it wasn't elegant. Microprocessor technology allowed a much more sophisticated interface. You could tune the controller to tune out tremors, to do any number of things. Plus, it allowed more sophisticated interface, sip and puff controls, head arrays. So it allowed folks with more significant disabilities to have independent mobility. You know, and what we love at Invacare is making life's experiences possible. That seminal moment, that change seemed relatively insignificant at the time, but it exploded the market for complex power, because it all of a sudden opened up that possibility for independent mobility to a whole bunch of folks who didn't have it before because the technology was too clumsy. The amazing thing was that all of a sudden they had different, because so you're a strapping young man. If I asked you to sit like that for the next, what'll seem like 2 hours of my presentation, it's a joke, and not move, you would get uncomfortable, because the circulation, your bony protuberances are cutting off circulation to your buttocks, and you have you're a robust guy, your neuromuscular functions work, and your body will tell you that you got a problem. If you stay that too long, you could develop pressure sores. Somebody with a spinal injury doesn't have that. They don't know. They have the same thing that's happening. They're at the same risk, but they don't have that checkpoint. They don't have that closed loop to tell them they got to move so to get the circulation going, and therefore they're at risk. And in the industry, there's another fashionable cliche is, what killed Superman? Anybody know? Christopher Reeves. What killed him? A pressure ulcer. He had access to the best technology available. He was in our chair. But he was so active and out and about, he didn't know. He didn't realize he had passed that pivotal point. He developed pressure ulcer and died of complications from the pressure ulcer. So with that ability to have more profoundly disabled people have independent mobility, that's what we live for at Invacare, making life's experiences possible. You had to have chairs that would tilt, recline, to allow a person to relieve the pressure. They have to mechanically know. They have to have a loved one or a therapist remind them. We're working on technology with Ohio State University. We got a study going on right now with technologies that will help do that, help give them reminders, so that they don't have to rely on memory or prods. That they'll get feedback to tell them to do that. So we're continuing to advance the art. But with that technology, there's a whole bunch of really interesting technologies for interfaces, for interfacing with your feet, your head arrays, sip and puff, eye recognition, eye movement. Which is just a beautiful thing, and we've got unique products we're by far #1 in the market. In Europe, where the infrastructure is older, we build high-rise buildings and tear them down in 30 years, so bringing them up to the latest standards is not a big deal, but they've got a lot of beautiful, elegant, wonderful, but old infrastructure. You can't put elevators in, you can't put ramps in, you can't tell people, you can pass along and tell people to do it, but it's just impossible. So this device allows you to take someone in a wheelchair up and downstairs. So they for emergency purposes or for living, for daily living. We have the best technology for ambulatory oxygen, and this device we created this category in the United States. There are 750 oxygen patients who are lucky enough to be ambulatory and have ambulatory oxygen. The old school we call it delivering milk. We get enriched oxygen, medical grade oxygen, and put it in a cylinder, and a dealer would deliver it to your house. Well, you got to wait for him to deliver it to you. And what this does, it saves the dealer money because it allows a patient to fill a cylinder, an E-tank, from an oxygen concentrator with a compressor. So they're independent. It takes the drive time out. It's a higher initial investment, but this form factor is 30% market share, and we've got 95% of that 30%, and is growing. This is for patients who require very frequent deliveries. This is the only way to go, and we created the category. I'm going to talk about the evolution of healthcare, because if you're just interested in business and in general, I'm happy to talk about that. If you're interested but this is part of my pitch to Wall Street on why Invacare is great, why our position is great, and why the market is great. And I said earlier that as a formal business, home medical device industry is fairly small, 0.4% of Medicare. Okay, not big, and it hasn't been even that big for very long. It didn't really become a formal and so this is like the anthropology of home care. And have you moved yet? Okay. In the 60s, again, I mentioned the runaway cost of healthcare. Up to the 60s, the most poignant example, when a woman went in to have a baby, she stayed there for 7, sometimes 10 days. My last granddaughter, my last grandchild, she was born late in the day. The last of 12, number 12. She was born late in the day, so she stayed overnight. His brother was delivered in a birthing center, and so one of the things they realized back in the 60s, runaway cost of healthcare, hot topic, just like it is now, budgetary problems, spending problems, deficit spending problems. One of the things they realized is the paradigm of going to a hospital and staying there till you were either dead or cured was the norm. That was the norm. So one of the things you had to do is get people out to a place where it's less expensive. And we call it the trifecta. People would rather be at home. It's more cost effective to be at home. And as I will discuss in further detail later, there is a growing body of clinical evidence that, in fact, you get better results at home. Provided you got equipment, provided you got care, you get better results at home. Not the least of which the reason is that you're not around sick people. It's shocking, the statistics on if you stay in a hospital, if it gets to 10 days or more, the probability of contracting an additional disease having nothing to do with why you were there in the first place it goes up, and it goes up exponentially. So the longer you're in the hospital, the higher risk you have. So God forbid you have to go to the hospital. So this is when HMOs, PPOs were created, ways to more actively manage healthcare, and the paradigm of getting people out of hospitals quicker and sicker was vogue. That was we were still using that cliche up through the 70s into the 80s, but you had to have services and equipment in the home, and that's when you hear about Medicare Part B. That's when they took money from that and carved out a piece of that money for services and equipment in the home. That's the genesis of Medicare Part B. And so that's when, obviously, at that point in time, home health care in the United States and again, we're a global company. Because we're here in the States, we talk more about that. This is the biggest part of the company is the U.S. But similar things happen elsewhere. In many cases in the industrialized world, other national health systems have been more innovative, more proactive in moving these things than the U.S. has. The U.S., we kind of do things. We put a great idea in place, and we go in and leave it for a long time. And they actively manage healthcare in a more insightful way in most other industrialized companies. That's the truth. That's the truth. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Great article in the November issue of the Harvard Business Review, and it talks about healthcare and lower cost ways to do it. It uses a juxtaposition to India and some of the things they're doing there, but they itemize some of the reasons our system isn't working, the things that are broken about our system. So you go from home was a place you went when you're cured, you didn't have a problem, to home was a place where you go when you're getting better. It's a place where you're recovering, and the future is home care is a place where you're going to go for treatment, and it's already starting to happen in Europe. It's happening here, and the things that are preventing it from happening are manifold. But one of the drivers in the U.S. to unlock this paradigm is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Some people say Obamacare disparagingly, some people say it lovingly, but most people know the Affordable Care Act is Obamacare. But most people don't have a clue about what Obamacare is. Most people think of Obamacare as providing health care for people who don't otherwise have formalized health care available to them in health insurance. It is that, but it also is targeted at fixing many of the problems that are wrong with our system. And you don't hear anything about that. You don't hear anything about it, surprisingly, from the Democrats. You don't hear much about it from the Republicans, and you certainly don't hear anything useful about it from the media. The media is unenlightened, and the political acrimony is so distracting that it's all focused on one single issue, and it's a disservice. And you need to know as citizens, you need to know as people going out in the world, that the system's broken. Your now voters are going to become voters. You need healthcare is 18% of the economy. It's a huge business opportunity, a huge career opportunity on the business side or on the clinical side. There's a lot of changes that are going on because change has been pent up and retarded by our healthcare system. They've got locked in on paradigms that have diseconomies that prevent good healthcare from being provided and prevent overuse of healthcare. And they add into that medical malpractice, pharma lobbies, and there's a whole lot wrong. And the Affordable Care Act. So if you look at the HBR article, interest in healthcare, that's a good. There's healthcare is so actively talked about now. There's rarely a month that goes by that there isn't an HBR article about healthcare. It's a good one, but good because the intent of the article is not to say what's wrong about. That's not their focus, but they talk about in juxtaposition. These are good things happening. Why doesn't? And here's the reason. Some of the reasons it doesn't happen here. Some of those reasons are addressed by Obamacare. If you like, Obamacare addresses the flaw of a pay-for-procedure base. You pay for procedures, and you get procedures. We think of hospitals. I'm on hospital boards. Okay, you think of hospitals. Only one right now, but I've been on others. You think of hospitals as not-for-profit. It's kind of a humanitarian thing. No, it just means that they don't pay taxes. That doesn't mean they're business people, just like I'm a business person. They just don't have to pay taxes. They don't have a big tax staff, okay, except for real estate taxes. So just because it's not for profit doesn't mean they're not tough, shrewd, accomplished business people. They are. Dr. Cosgrove is a tough, shrewd businessman. And he doesn't pay taxes, but he's a tough, shrewd businessman, okay? And he makes a hell of a lot of money. Believe me, they make a hell of a lot of money. And that's what he's paid to do. But they do procedures because that's what the system pays them to do, okay? Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, does away with a fee-for-service model, which is just ensures that you get a lot of procedures, and it does away with that, and it is a capitated model. You deal with the patient and all of his problems, and you deal with them for a period of time, and you're fully responsible. Have anybody ever read an article in the Wall Street Journal page about, or the Plain Dealer or Cranes about fee-for-service? Nah, it's just, it's screwed up. It's really screwed up, and it's got to get fixed. The Republicans aren't talking about it. The Democrats have done something to fix it. And they don't explain to you, what are these idiots trying to do? We got to fix this. Okay, what's your idea? I understand you're not happy about it. I understand you want to defund it. Well, what are you going to do about this? That's irresponsible. You got to be active, and you got to be voters. You got to be informed voters, and you got to understand this is, again, someday you're going to be taking care of the health care of your mothers and fathers, and just like I am with my 94-year-old mother, and you got to know this stuff, okay? And you might want to get into business. Knowing this stuff, change favors the prepared mind, okay? There's a lot of change going on in healthcare, and there'll be people guessing, and but it's important for you to know as citizens, important for you to understand as a business model, and because similar things happen in other businesses. The Affordable Care Act addresses that, because problem number 2 in the HBR, November issue that it cites, is the overexpansion of hospital facilities. Because you're paying for procedures, I love the clinic, and we're so blessed as a community to have the Cleveland Clinic available to us, and University Hospital. We are very few communities that have so much access to such wonderful care, and that's a good thing. The fact that both of them are going out every interstate highway corridor building new facilities has nothing to do with the need. Has nothing to do with the need. Trying to capture share. And what happened? And so this is business 101. When the needs aren't increasing, but infrastructure is increasing, overall the average cost of providing the service goes up, right? It goes up. And so all this, you see all these wonderful facilities going up, and wonderful people who've gotten their names on them and contributed a bunch of money. It's not helping the community. It's not helping the community. Obamacare deals with that too. And the fact that they don't take credit for it, the fact that the press doesn't understand these things, the fact that we're not exposed to this is astonishing. Two big things. You look at the HBR. What it doesn't address, and that's another flaw in our political system, it doesn't address the pharma lobbies, okay, because it doesn't affect it doesn't address medical malpractice. Our representatives in Congress need money to stay in office, and they get money from pharma, and they get money from trial lawyers, and you go anywhere. If you study healthcare and the problems of healthcare, and it's at the root of that is pharmaceutical, compared to any other system, pharmaceutical costs and medical malpractice. We don't have anybody in Washington who has the courage to deal with that. I had lunch with Blouch recently. He decided to quit and not run again. But and if we don't deal with that as a country, as a system, we are never going to get ourselves on the right track. And even as courageous as Obama was doing this bold move, he didn't want to touch that. And that's until we get people in office who are more concerned about us than they are about getting reelected, that's not going to get solved. We have a problem as a nation. Okay, it doesn't address those two things, but it addresses 2 of the 4. Okay, which is no small thing. So the Affordable Care Act. So the underpinning of the Affordable Care Act. How does that happen? It happens through the creation of accountable care organizations. Anybody heard of accountable care organizations? Wow, it's worse than I thought, huh? Well, there are 206. The CMS, the Health and Human Services, has funded 206 models. So there's the Cleveland Clinic's in one, Kaiser's in one. So they're developing models. So they're given a notional directions on what they wanted, and at the core of that is we're not going to pay you for procedures. We're going to pay you to take care of Jerry Blouch. Okay, he's got hip replacement, and you're going to get this much money to do everything and anything associated with that, including, and you're only get a one-time fee. And including if there's problems and he comes back, you're not going to give you any more. You know, the current system, they get this much money, and as long as you get Jerry out of the hospital for 48 hours, not exactly, but if he comes back, you know, so if Jerry's got a problem, they'll put him in a step-down unit before they bring him back into acute care, so that they can get paid again. There's all sorts of gamesmanship, and it's all within the rules, but that's tough business people running not-for-profit. But so anyhow, and so to succeed, accountable care organizations have to improve outcome, reduce length of stay, and reduce readmissions, and the infrastructure of the Affordable Care Act deals with that. Let's say that. So also the Harvard Business Review article in July noted structurally that the Affordable Care Act will move people from acute care to long-term care to home care. That's where we are. The benefits of home care. I told you those. There's more and more clinical studies that document that not only is it safe, but you get better outcomes. If you got care there, if you got monitoring, you get better outcomes for less cost, and patients would rather be there. In Denmark, from 1950, Denmark had 110 hospitals. Today they've got 25 hospitals, and they're going down to 15. That's because it's a place for a lot of sick people to go. Getting people dealing with the crisis, and moving them on down the stream is more cost effective. It's better outcomes, and that's where they're investing their model. So other people are doing it. Other people have figured it out. Our system keeps people from doing that. Our system encourages people to build more buildings, to have people where they shouldn't be in the first place. There's in addition to the 206 experiments with affordable ACOs, there's also experiments out there for hospital in the home, and every one of them that I've seen comes back to the same result, that you get better outcomes, the patients prefer it. This talks about you read the study, talks about 90.7% satisfaction. The only place where they didn't rate the satisfaction higher than acute care was on food, believe it or not. So go figure. Enabling technology. There was a quote back there that I didn't read from Dr. Loop, former chairman of but there's any number of people who cite the fact that enabling technology will allow us to have people at home monitoring their compliance, monitoring their biometrics, so that they know whether there's a problem. That's key to getting people out. And this is really bold. It talks about remote monitoring will allow even ICU patients potentially to be taken care of in the home. So the savings are billions. This is just another thing. This is my business, so I got a bazillion studies on why it's cheaper, better, safer, and patient preferred. Demographics, you all know that, the graying of America, the aging of the population. Brian, my friend here, and my new BFF. So people are getting older, and but worse than that, we're getting our health is declining. Okay, the prevalence of chronic disease, the number of people over 60 who have one chronic illness is high. It's a staggering. The number that have two or more is growing and is also big too. So as a population, our health is declining. So the Inmate Care's top priorities, we're working on a consent decree, which basically said the FDA said we're not happy that you're at the facility out here, that the control procedures are adequate, and we have to bring them up to FDA standards. So we're in the final stages of doing that. We expect to have that behind us shortly. But there was the flaw of our very decentralized strategy, which was highly successful, is it was very expensive, but that was okay because reimbursement was very hard, but it was very good, very generous. It's been compressing, and it was cost that didn't provide a clinical benefit. It was cost that only served to have products that fit local regulations. So it satisfied an administrator in Paris or Washington, and it didn't provide any other value. It allowed our customers to get paid faster. That's not a formula for success. We identified several years ago that we have to strip the complexity out of the business, And that's called, we call it globalization. So we're converting from regional product platforms to global product platforms that can be tailored to the needs of the patient and idiosyncratic regulatory requirements as close to that market and as close to that patient as possible. It's called globalization. It starts with developing product roadmaps. We're managing products globally, not regionally. It's creating global roadmaps that bring these product lines together, allows us to strip out costs, simplify the business, simplify the administration, and we're going from a holding company, a multinational holding company, to a global business with global product platforms, and a lot of documentations, a lot of details, and time doesn't permit. But the target is by 2016 to take $100 million annualized benefit out of the business, and it's there. We're slowed down a bit with the consent decree, but it's there. So strengths of home care, positive demographics, growing prevalence of chronic disease states, compelling benefits of home care, healthcare reform, and enabling technologies. It's all going there. That's where it needs to be. It's the bloody rules that are slowing it down, okay? And other countries are going faster. So needless to say, I'm going to turn this into a political debate. Strengths of Invacare: industry-leading market share, strong brand reputation, comprehensive range of healthcare products, strong sales and marketing coverage, geographically diversified, flexible sourcing, and management team with strong ownership. We got a vested interest in what's good for our shareholders is good for us. So, in closing, healthcare reform is long overdue. Apologies to Michelangelo, but if he did the David now, this is what he looked like. Okay, I don't know what's going to happen to healthcare reform. I'm a white old businessman, so obviously I'm a Republican. But but I'm appalled that our party, that the Republicans and the Democrats are not doing this subject a service. They're not doing the country a service. They're not doing their citizens and their constituents a service. They didn't even talk about the problems. Even the crazy Democrats even fixed a bunch of them. They had the vision and the courage to put some solutions in place, and they didn't even say, well, wait a second. You know, if I was to say, okay, Boehner, what are you doing about this? I mean, doing nothing isn't a choice. Doing nothing is not a choice. Okay. Prediction is very difficult. I don't know where it's going, but prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. And that was said by, in a not so lucid moment, by a Nobel Prize winner, Niels Bohr. And this is going to be a real belly flop, given the age of the audience here. But somebody has to do something, and it's just incredibly pathetic that it has to be Congress. Credits to Jerry Garcia. Now, I know that I realized too late that none of you know who Jerry Garcia is, and I thought it was a great idea if this was my target audience. So Jerry Garcia was a pothead, the Grateful Dead, but I thought it was still kind of clever anyhow. And I knew I was in trouble when I asked David this morning. I said, if I said Jerry Garcia, what would you say? He said, Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And I said, okay, my staff told me to take it out, and I just couldn't help myself. I like the Grateful Dead. So anyhow, at Invacare, we're passionate about making life's experience. We're passionate about bringing technology. I could bring a team and we could talk about future technology and where it's going and what we have an opportunity to bring to the marketplace to help facilitate this, and we're working on that, and that's wonderful. But we're all about making life's experiences to millions of people who use our products every day. Thank you for your time. Question. Extra credit points for the first question. Yes.
Do you see your
write this man's name down?
Do you see your company expanding a lot larger as the baby boomers move into retirement and get into their wheelchair ages? No. Absolutely. We've got this. So you got the aging population,
and it's the compounded annual growth rate of the aging of the population is going to accelerate, and the numbers, I think, by 2030 there'll be 70 million. So the percentage of the population is going to continue to grow. It'll be 70 million. It's a 40-some million now. So it's going to be 70 million. That by itself is a big opportunity. On top of that, we got a lot more chronic diseases than our predecessors, so our medical needs are going up. On top of that, then you get layer on top of that, we shouldn't be in a bloody hospital anyhow. And if you provide services and technology, so you got aging the population, more chronic disease, and getting people out of the hell, we keep them from being trapped in hospitals, because that's where people get paid for doing things. Fix those things, and home care is a boomer, okay? And they got to get fixed. And they're being fixed outside of America. They got to, our people inside the Beltway got to get their poop together. Good question. Yes.
Could you please speak to the medical device provisions of the Affordable Care Act?
You mean the device tax?
Yeah.
Oh, golly. I had the pleasure of speaking to a Senate committee on that. It was amazing. Do I have to say something nice?
You can say whatever you want.
It was a bad idea. I mean, it penalizes innovation. The costs have to be passed through anyhow. So you think like, well, okay, if you're going to tax us, not all of our products, devices are taxed, but that's a quirk. But when I spoke to the committee, I said, well, I don't get it, because I'm going to have to raise my prices, and then eventually reimbursement will have to go up, and eventually you just force me to do something that you're going to have to pay for. How does that work for you? I don't get it. So, well, we don't want you to raise your prices. I said, and I get it. It's strange, but I get that you don't want me to. I don't get that you think I can't and won't. I said, so I can and I will and I have to. So it was a lot of bright, nice people inside the Beltway who have no life experience at all. And this was an example of that. And it'll probably get repealed. It was silly.
Do you get volume? Do you get profits as a result of expanded volume? You're providing services to more people?
Well, eventually, yes. Yeah, and that was the theory was in our space until that's more so in the short run. But I know that the Democrats use that as an argument. But if you look at the beneficiaries of a formal insurance entitlement that they didn't have in the past, and you look at the profile of what their needs are, that's not, there's a lot of stuff that it's not hip replacements and wheelchairs and a lot of our stuff, being on hospital boards at Elyria. This is public information. It's like almost 10% of their revenues is charitable service. So it's not good. It's not because it's done in an emergency room. It's delayed too long. But most of the things we provide, they get anyhow. Okay. They just get them through a different vehicle. There are parts of the industry, the health device industry, that'll benefit from that. But by and large, no. I know that was an argument. Yeah, you a Democrat? Yeah, I knew it. Could tell. Sneaky, sweet look. Yes.
You talked about the hospital model.
Yes.
And I'm trying to understand how that's less expensive, because you'd have the distribution of technology and services at all these levels, where at a hospital you have it.
No, I can share studies with you, and there isn't one study that doesn't suggest that that's the case. It's less expensive, number one, because the preponderance of care is provided by a loved one at no cost. Okay. Number two. Sorry. The question was in the hospital, in the home care. Because you still have to provide equipment, you still have to provide services. So how does it end up being any less expensive? It's a good question. And anybody wants, there's a bazillion studies, and I can give you copies or get you copies. The number one is the preponderance of care is delivered by a loved one at no cost. And number two, as I said before, the shocking reality of when you're in a hospital, the chances of getting sick and have other problems that are going to have to be taken care of and paid for is high. Okay. And number three, because the outcomes are better for that and other reasons. So those are what is consistently documented. And you don't have all the infrastructure. You may have the equipment, but you don't have brick and mortar. There are too damn many hospitals. It's the dirty little truth but if you talk to people inside the Beltway, the estimates are that at least 900 community hospitals will disappear under the Affordable Care Act. That's a good thing. Unless you're working in a community hospital, but it's a good thing. There's too much brick and mortar. Too much brick and mortar. Okay. Good question. Yes.
How has the competitive bidding affected your company?
CMS came up with it was only people inside the Beltway can do it. They call this program competitive bidding. Nobody's 165 economists, including global Nobel Prize winners, and it's not competitive bidding at all. But so,
competitive suicide.
Yeah. The good question. It's too early to tell. They put a program in place and allowed anybody to bid in 91 metropolitan markets, MSAs, and allowed people to bid on servicing 11 categories of equipment, and in most markets, a significant portion. In some markets, the majority of the winners had never been in the market before. There was winners who were not licensed to do business in the state, didn't have credentials to do business in the states they were in, and Congress is investigating that now. So it's a horrible program. And on top of that, I mentioned one-stop shopping. So before competitive bidding, when the discharge planner at the clinic sent somebody home, they make one call and get everything for that patient. To now if it's a Medicare patient, they okay, it's a concentrator, I got to call David. It's a bed, I got to call. So now where you got one delivery, lean, efficient supply chain. Now they got to grope around and find 4 or 5 people, 2 or 3 people to service the needs. It's a stupid. I mean, it's just a horrible program. But to answer your that wasn't part of your question, and I'm sorry, how could I say? So, but the answer, it's too soon to tell. Too soon to tell.
I mean, I know a little bit about your company.
Mm-hmm.
You're a one-stop shop.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're doing away with the one-stop shop, how is that affecting? Because people can order from you, and they can order wheelchairs and this and that and the other thing. Well, if they weren't approved for a wheelchair and they weren't approved for this, only approved for one item, how is that affecting? As far as is it affecting your business? Well,
the majority of people who are discharged need multiple pieces of equipment. Okay.
Right, but I'm just saying these home health care providers.
So now the patient who needs multiple pieces of equipment are serviced by numerous different dealers. Okay, right. So that's doesn't affect. It makes our one-stop shopping for people who focus on Medicare patients less attractive if they only, because if they just focus on Medicare, they just focus on, and now the only thing they want is beds, and that's the only thing they've got. Obviously, they don't need the other stuff. Okay, so but that's all sorting out. I think the only thing that's clear is the losers will be selling their equipment to the losers will either be getting into the other lines of business, private pay, or if that's not enough to deploy the assets they have, they'll be selling them to people who won bids, and so the pipeline is going to, so for a time until that smooths itself out, we'll logically see a dip in business, but that's a moment of time. Competitive bidding didn't affect entitlements, it didn't affect demand, but it will affect the supply chain, and it's really too early to tell. As we talk to Wall Street, the thing that we need to be most, I say as investors, if you're a shareholder, the thing you need to be most concerned about is have people adjusted their business plan to accommodate a lower profit base, and that's the thing that we've been focusing people on, not our pricing, but it's credit loss, and that's where I would expect to have problems to the extent we can. We've been building up our reserves to cushion against that, but it's too early to tell. Yes.
At some point, possibly not for the future, eventually technology is going to overtake the human factor of healthcare. What happens to the healthcare industry at that point?
Oh, wow. golly, I'm just trying to solve simple things. That's really that's a great thing. A lot of that's going to happen. And again, even though reimbursement slows, the question was, as technology advances, it reduces the human element, and what are the implications on that to the healthcare industry? I have to say that the healthcare industry right now is more concerned about the sufficiency of healthcare of practitioners because of the population, because of the population, the chronic diseases, and the reduced number of people who are tired who are tired of dealing with people at the hospital. Get doctors who are retiring at an earlier age than normal because they're tired of the medical malpractice. They're tired of the forms. They're tired of the documentation. So you got a shrinking group of practitioners. So when that happens, and it'll happen, it'll probably bring a welcome relief to an industry that's having difficulty bringing people in as practitioners. So, good question. Good. Oh, come on, Democrats get one. Good. All right.
Two-part question. How much?
That's two questions. Golly.
I'll make it quick. How much of your revenue is concentrated on Medicare, and do you have any concerns with the future of Medicare? How that will impact your business?
We don't get paid. We sell to people, so we get none of our revenue comes directly from Medicare. So we provide equipment to intermediaries, institutions, and home medical equipment providers who service patients. They're the ones that get paid. So I don't know if I can unwind this. To answer your question, I could only give you rough guidance. So it doesn't affect anything outside of the United States. Okay, you got a fair amount of business in Canada, but so it only deals with roughly 50% of the market. And Medicare, the rule of thumb is that Medicare is 40% of the pay for people in the medical device industry, and then you got another 40% that is private insurance, and then 10% that's Medicaid, and the rest is cash. So, having said that, the private pay frequently, eventually, will emulate Medicare, unless Medicare's done something stupid. So it's specious to say Medicare is whatever's there is in isolation. It's the biggest single buyer, so it influences the other buyers. So I don't know, but it affects maybe 40% or 50%. So, but it's big. Yeah, what was the second part?
That was it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Could you tell us what percentage of your revenues and sales comes from government sources?
Depends on what you mean. If you mean, well.
In Thailand, strangely, 70% of one hospital I know, they say 70% of their source of revenue is from individual payers.
Well, in the LDLs there isn't much of a formalized government-supported healthcare system. Even in communist China, which I was a senior party official in healthcare, so there's a bit of an irony that in the greedy capitalist environment, we're more effective at providing healthcare for our citizens than in a communist nation. So it's that's not the fact that in some countries it's a lot of private pay. That's a.
You were struggling to answer the question of what percent of your sales comes from government sources.
No, that wasn't the question. It was the payers. Okay, it was payers. So if your question is where we sell directly to the government, like the VA, or where the government funds it? Yeah, 40%. We don't get paid directly by the government for anything other than the VA and some national health. Our customers, I know. I just want to make that clear because people get confused about that. For our customers in the United States, 40% of the the equipment we provide to our customers, given industry standards, gets paid for by Medicare, 10% by Medicaid. Okay. Outside of the United States, it's much higher because the national health systems are more predominant, the predominant model in the industrialized world outside of the United States. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
It didn't, I can tell. And you're a fellow Republican.
Yes, I am.
I can tell you. Old white guy. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Oh, I got a new one back there. I'll come back to you. Yeah.
I have a question about the home care.
Yes.
Assuming I'm quite a lawyer, given the trend of this, given the fact that there's no reform in the medical malpractice, my only enemy was the technology. Given that the technology is not improving that much, should I be pretty happy, as you saying that the home care patients will have operation at home and taking care of that? And how much technology you can foresee that could defeat my attempt to bring in more malpractice lawsuits?
That's an interesting question. I have no data on. It's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. I don't know how I would answer it. So the number of people who are getting in the United States, which is where the cancer is, where the problem is on medical malpractice. I suppose, to the extent that more people have access to a formal healthcare entitlement, increases the population of potential problems that you'd have access to. The government's done some interesting things. You probably know more about than I do. The Medicare actually did a clever thing. They said, wait a second, we're paying to help people recover from problems, and if it was medical malpractice, then the patient, we've already taken care of the problem, and then they're getting paid again for stuff we've paid for. So now we have to, the hospitals and device manufacturers have to report to the government when we've had a settlement, a product liability settlement, and they go back to the recipient to get the money, which makes sense. And so the numbers. So at the bottom of the food chain, the small cases, a lot of that's going to disappear. So that's the best I can do. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Even with the whole change of the healthcare,
no, that's a great question. No, we sell technology. Most of our devices are in a rental fleet. Okay, so I'll do a hypothetical. So we always get. I mean, I hope our buyers are always asking for reductions of price. That's a constant. That's free enterprise. But most of our devices are in a rental fleet. And so the response to that is, we're number one in oxygen concentrators. There's a wonderful gentleman, Larry Chen, in Taiwan. He's a friend of mine. Get together with his family. He has a knockoff concentrator. It's a decent product, and Larry day in and day out sells his concentrator for 10% less than what we sell. So when that comes up, the provider says, well, reimbursement on oxygen went down. I can save $40 on a concentrator for Merits. Can you match that? I said, well, how long do Larry's concentrators last? And the answer will be, I don't know. I never had one. Okay. So, well, okay. What is his warranty? And how long do ours last? And so at the end of the day, you take a device that for us that was warranted for 5 years, usually lasts 10 years. So you got 120 months worth of revenue opportunity. So, well, okay, if you save 10%. Getting Larry's product, that means you got to be confident that you're going to get at least 90% as much serviceable life out of it, and check around. I think you'll find that if you can get 3 years out of Larry's product, you're lucky. So that's the response. You want to have a robust, serviceable product, and you got to look at the total lifetime cost, not the transaction cost. That's our program. And matter of fact, we're having a better job selling the home fill for ambulatory oxygen because of the cost saving, which is a more expensive solution than the alternatives, because their operating costs go down, and we've had a hard time making enough of those this year to supply demand. So Do we get asked? Of course. And if the fleet management argument doesn't work, then we've got lower, less robustly featured, richly featured products that we have as an alternative, as opposed to just like-for-like price reduction.
Then one more.
Last question.
Just your chart right now shows the end of 2012, and with the world changing and underdeveloped countries becoming more modernized and so on. Where do you see? What do you think that's going to look like in 5 years?
I think I don't think the geographic. We've got significant opportunities in the industrialized world, and in the LDCs. It's more commodity-based product, and that's not where we are. So there's and if 5% of the population in China is certainly or more can afford Western-style products, that's an attractive market, but it's tough to get to. I say that's the only one that is attracted to me. Japan's a tough market. There's no company in our industry has been effective in getting into Japan. We have some niche products that they can't get elsewhere that we sell to Japan. So we've got huge opportunities within the industrialized world. I think there's a couple places that we're looking at, but I don't. In 5 years, I don't think it'll be significantly different. Thank you. You've been a good audience.